Imagine yourself waking before the dawn. The world is not woken by an alarm, but by the slow, grey light filtering through a single, small, unglazed window in a cramped attic room. The air is cold and smells of damp plaster, wood smoke, and the faint, ever-present odour of the street below. You are not a knight clad in shining armour. You are not a noble lady in a silken gown, nor a scholar poring over ancient texts. You are a far more common and far more vital figure in the hidden drama of medieval life. You are a messenger, a courier, and the package you carry today is a dangerous and precious thing. A love letter. If you enjoy these journeys into the past, I'd really appreciate a quick like, or even a subscribe. It helps our small community of quiet history lovers grow more than you know. I'm always curious where you all are listening from, so feel free to drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's fascinating to see our global community connecting through these stories. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your life is one of perpetual motion and profound anonymity. You are the human thread that connects two hearts, the living vessel for their secret words. But your role in their romance is not a romantic one. It is a life of grinding physical hardship, of constant, low-level fear, and of a deep, often unspoken, social invisibility. You are the ghost in their love story, the unsung and often unthanked facilitator of their passion. Your day begins with a simple, meager meal. A piece of hard, dark bread, perhaps a small wedge of cheese, and a cup of weak, lukewarm ale. This is the fuel that will have to sustain you for a long day of travel. You put on your clothes, a rough wool tunic, simple hose, and heavy leather shoes that are perpetually damp and caked with the mud of 100 different roads. Your master or mistress, a wealthy merchant's wife perhaps, or a young, ambitious squire, summons you to their private chamber. The room is warm, lit by the gentle glow of beeswax candles, a world away from your own cold attic. They hand you the letter. It is not in a simple, plain envelope. It is a piece of fine, expensive parchment, carefully folded and sealed with a drop of coloured wax, impressed with their family's crest. The parchment itself is a symbol of wealth and importance. It might even be faintly scented with perfume, with the scent of lavender or rose, a ghostly trace of the person who wrote it. With the letter comes a small pouch of coins for your journey and a stern, whispered set of instructions. To this address, into her hands only, and be discreet. Discretion. That is the word that defines your existence. You are a keeper of secrets, a professional repository of other people's desires. The contents of the letter you carry are a mystery to you, but you can guess. It is a declaration of forbidden love, an arrangement for a secret meeting, a poem filled with longing. In a world where marriages are arranged for political and economic advantage, where the church preaches the virtues of chastity and the dangers of carnal desire, a private love letter is a deeply subversive and dangerous object. It is a small rebellion, a quiet act of defiance against the rigid social order. And you are the one who must carry this rebellion across the landscape. Your journey begins. If the letter is to be delivered within the city, your path is through a labyrinth of narrow, winding, and filthy streets. The medieval city is a sensory assault. The streets are unpaved, a river of mud and animal waste. You must navigate a chaotic obstacle course of wandering pigs, stray dogs, and the slops thrown from the windows above. The air is thick with the smells of 1,000 different trades. The stench of the tanner's yard, the smoke of the blacksmith's forge, the aroma of baking bread, and the ever-present, overpowering smell of human and animal effluvia. You walk with your head down, your eyes alert. You are looking for the signs of danger, a group of rowdy apprentices looking for someone to bully, a city guard who might stop you and question your business, a rival family's servant who might recognize you and wonder at your purpose in this part of the city. You are a nobody, and your anonymity is your greatest protection. You try to blend in, to become part of the background, just another face in the faceless crowd. But perhaps your journey is a longer one. Perhaps the letter must be delivered to a castle or a monastery many miles away. Now, you must leave the relative safety of the city walls and venture out onto the open road. The medieval countryside is not a place of pastoral bucolic peace. It is a place of real and constant danger. The roads are little more than muddy tracks, and the great forests that cover much of the landscape are known to be the haunt of bandits and outlaws. You travel on foot, as a horse is a luxury far beyond your means. You walk for 10, 12 hours a day, your pace steady and determined. You learn to read the weather, to see the signs of an approaching storm in the clouds. You learn to find shelter for the night, perhaps in a crowded, lice-ridden inn where you will share a straw mattress with several snoring strangers, or perhaps simply in the lee of a farmer's haystack. The food you eat is whatever you can afford or find. A bowl of thin pottage at an inn, a handful of berries foraged from a hedgerow. The physical discomfort of your life is a constant companion. Your feet are perpetually sore, your boots never fully dry. The coarse wool of your tunic chafes your skin. You are in a constant, low-level state of hunger and fatigue, and you are almost certainly infested with lice and fleas, a simple, unavoidable fact of life for most people in this age. Your own body is a landscape of small miseries, an aching tooth you cannot have pulled, a cut on your hand that festers and refuses to heal, the gnawing anxiety of a winter cough that will not go away. This is the unromantic, physical reality that underpins the delicate, perfumed world of the letters you carry. And then there is the fear. Every stranger you meet on the road is a potential threat. Is that group of men approaching a band of pilgrims or a band of thieves who will slit your throat for the few coins in your purse? Is that friendly traveler who offers to share his fire for the night a genuine companion, or someone who will rob you while you sleep? You learn to be wary, to be watchful, to trust no one. But the greatest fear is not of common bandits, it is of being caught with the letter. The consequences of being discovered depend entirely on the contents of the message and the status of the people who sent and were meant to receive it. If it is a simple, innocent letter between two betrothed lovers, perhaps there is no danger. But what if it is more? What if it is a letter from a married noblewoman to her secret lover, a young knight in her husband's service? If you are intercepted by the husband's men, the letter will be read, and your role in their forbidden affair will not be overlooked. The punishment for being an accomplice in such a matter would be swift and brutal. You would be taken back to the husband's castle, and you would be interrogated. They would want to know everything. How many letters have you carried? Where did they meet? Who else knew? Under torture, you would likely tell them everything you know, and then you would be punished as an example. You might be publicly flogged in the castle courtyard, your back laid open with a leather whip. You might be put in the stocks or the pillory, your head and hands locked in a wooden frame, left for days to endure the jeers and the refuse thrown by the local villagers. Or you might simply be thrown into a dark, damp dungeon and forgotten. Your life, your well-being, is entirely dependent on the secrecy of the very people whose passion you are serving. There is also the political danger. In a world of shifting alliances and feudal rivalries, a love letter can be a political document. What if the letter is from a young noblewoman to a knight from a rival, enemy family? Their secret love affair could be seen as an act of treason, a secret alliance. If you are caught carrying such a letter, you will not be treated as a simple messenger. You will be treated as a spy. And the punishment for spying is death. You would be hanged from the nearest tree, your body left to rot as a warning to others. You are a pawn in a game far larger and more dangerous than you can possibly understand. Beyond the physical hardship and the constant fear, there is a deeper, more subtle burden that you carry. It is the emotional burden of your profession. You are the conduit for the most intense and private of human emotions, but you are not allowed to participate in them. You carry letters filled with words of passionate devotion, of desperate longing, of poetic beauty. You are the first to touch the parchment that, just hours before, was being held by a noble lady as she poured her heart out onto the page. You can smell the faint trace of her perfume. You can see the tear stain that has smudged a single word. And you, a man who will likely never have the luxury of marrying for love, who will never have the education to write such beautiful words, who will never know the touch of a lady's hand, you are the silent, invisible bridge between them. You read letters you could never write, for people you could never be. This creates a profound sense of detachment, of being a perpetual outsider, a ghost at the feast of love. You are a professional and you maintain your professional distance. But sometimes, on a long, lonely road, you might be tempted to break the seal, to read the words that are not meant for you. To do so would be a gross betrayal of your trust, a crime that could cost you your job, and perhaps your life. But the temptation is there, the human curiosity to know, to feel, for just a moment, a part of the passionate world that you are paid to serve, but from which you are forever excluded. Your life is a series of these small, unrecorded moments of risk and quiet endurance. You deliver your letter. You wait, perhaps for hours, in a cold kitchen or a stable for the reply to be written. The reply is handed to you, another sealed, perfumed packet of secrets. And then you begin the long, arduous journey back. your path fraught with the same dangers, the same discomforts, the same quiet, gnawing anxieties. When you finally return, you deliver the reply to your master or mistress. They take it from you, their eyes shining with anticipation. They might give you a small extra coin for your trouble, a gesture of gratitude, but they do not see you. They see the letter. They see the words of their beloved. You are the messenger, and now that the message has been delivered, you are invisible again. You retreat back to your cold attic room, to your life of a few coins and a hard loaf of bread, while in the warm, candlelit rooms below, the great, dangerous, and beautiful drama of love, a drama that you have made possible, continues without you. This is your life, a constant journey through the heart of other people's stories, a quiet, thankless, and utterly essential role in the secret history of the human heart. Let us now step away from the anonymous courier and his life of mud and fear and turn our attention to the authors of just such a letter. We move from the world of the common man to the highest echelons of intellectual and religious life in 12th century Paris. This was a city in the midst of a great awakening, a burgeoning center of learning and philosophy that was attracting the brightest minds from all over Europe. And in this vibrant, competitive world of ideas, two figures shone more brightly than any others. Their story, a tale of forbidden love, of intellectual passion, and of devastating consequences, would become one of the great, tragic romances of the Middle Ages, a story preserved for us through their own brilliant, heartbreaking, and deeply personal letters. This is the story of Peter Abelard and Héloïse d'Argenteuil. To understand their story, we must first understand the two remarkable individuals at its center. Peter Abelard, born in 1079, was the most famous and controversial intellectual of his day. He was a philosopher, a theologian, and a logician of breathtaking skill and arrogance. He was a man who had, from a young age, renounced his inheritance and a future life as a knight to pursue the life of the mind. He came to Paris as a young man and quickly established himself as a brilliant, charismatic, and deeply disruptive force. His method was dialectic, a rigorous form of logical argument, and he used it to publicly challenge and often humiliate his own teachers and the established intellectual authorities of the time. He was, in essence, the rock star of 12th century philosophy, and his lectures at the Cathedral School of Notre Dame attracted thousands of students from across Europe, all eager to hear his dazzling displays of logic and his critiques of traditional doctrine. He was a man at the absolute peak of his fame and his intellectual powers, a man who, by his own admission, believed himself to be the only true philosopher left in the world. And then there was Héloïse. She was a young woman of extraordinary, almost unprecedented intellectual gifts. Born around the year 1100, she was the niece of a man named Fulbert, a canon of the Notre Dame Cathedral. Fulbert, recognizing his niece's prodigious intellect, had provided her with an education that was virtually unheard of for a woman of her time. She was fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. She was deeply read in classical literature, in scripture, and in philosophy. By the time she was a teenager, her reputation for learning had spread throughout Paris. She was not just a curiosity. She was a respected scholar in her own right, a woman whose mind was considered the equal of any man's in a city that was the intellectual capital of the world. It was this reputation that brought her to the attention of Peter Abelard. In the year 1115, Abelard was in his mid-30s, a celebrated master, a man who had, until this point, lived a life of celibacy, entirely devoted to his work. But, as he would later write in his autobiographical letter, the Historia Calamitatum, or the story of my misfortunes, his very success had led him to a state of pride and idleness. He saw Héloïse, and he was captivated, not just by her renowned beauty, but by her brilliant mind. He decided, with the same calculated arrogance with which he approached his philosophical debates, that he would seduce her. He devised a plan. He approached her uncle, Fulbert, and proposed that he, the great Abelard, become Héloïse's private tutor. He offered to move into Fulbert's house, and in exchange for lodging, he would provide Héloïse with an education that no one else in the world could offer. Fulbert, flattered by the attention of the famous philosopher and eager to further his niece's education, readily agreed. He gave Abelard complete authority over his niece, instructing him to be a stern and demanding teacher, even to use physical punishment if she was lazy in her studies. As Abelard would later write, with a chilling frankness, this was like entrusting a tender lamb to a ravenous wolf. And so, under the guise of scholarly instruction, one of the great and tragic love affairs of history began. Their tutoring sessions, held in the quiet of Eloise's room, quickly turned from lessons in philosophy to lessons in love. Abelard wrote that more kisses than theorems passed between us, and that his hands strayed more often to her breast than to their books. They were consumed by a passion that was both intellectual and physical. For Abelard, it was a new and intoxicating experience, a distraction that began to consume his professional life. His lectures, once models of clarity and brilliance, became lackluster and uninspired. He stopped writing new philosophy and began to write love songs, which, due to his fame, quickly became the popular hits of the Parisian student scene. For Heloise, the relationship was more complex. She was not a passive victim of seduction. She was an active, willing, and intellectually equal partner in the affair. In her own letters, written years later, she speaks of a deep and genuine love for Abelard, but also of the profound conflict she felt. She knew the immense risks they were taking. A public affair would ruin Abelard's career as a churchman and a theologian, a career that required at least the appearance of celibacy. She famously argued against the idea of marriage, not out of a lack of love, but out of a desire to protect his intellectual freedom. She wrote to him that she would rather be his whore than his wife. This was not a statement of self-loathing, it was a radical philosophical argument. For her, marriage was a form of bondage, a social contract that would trap him in a world of domestic cares, of crying children and household management. It would destroy his ability to be a great philosopher. She wanted to be his intellectual and romantic partner, to exist with him in a pure, free union of minds and bodies, unconstrained by the mundane and, in her view, degrading institution of marriage. This was an astonishingly modern and deeply subversive argument for a woman of the 12th century to make, but their secret could not last. As is often the case, it was her uncle, Fulbert, who was the last to know. But when he finally discovered the truth, his love and pride for his niece turned into a furious, vengeful rage. He felt he had been betrayed, his hospitality abused, his family's honor destroyed. He threw Abelard out of his house. The two lovers were separated, but their separation only intensified their longing. They continued to meet in secret. And then, Eloise discovered that she was pregnant. This was a catastrophe. Abelard, in a panic, arranged for Eloise to be smuggled out of Paris, disguised as a nun, and taken to his family's home in Brittany. There, she gave birth to a son, whom they named Astrolabe, after the complex astronomical instrument, a testament to their shared intellectual world. While she was away, Abelard, in an attempt to appease her furious uncle, made a fateful offer. He proposed to marry Eloise, but he insisted that the marriage must be kept a secret, so as not to damage his career. Fulbert agreed, but his agreement was a trap. Abelard brought Heloise back to Paris, and they were married in a secret pre-dawn ceremony. But Fulbert, far from being appeased, began to deliberately spread the news of the marriage. His goal was not to restore his family's honor, but to ruin Abelard. Abelard, seeing the danger, sent Heloise to the safety of a convent at Argenteuil, the very convent where she had been educated as a girl. This was not, at this stage, meant to be a permanent arrangement. It was a way to protect her from her uncle's rage. But Fulbert interpreted this move in the worst possible way. He believed that Abelard had grown tired of Eloise and was now trying to dispose of her by forcing her to become a nun. His desire for revenge now became absolute, and he planned an act of brutal, shocking violence. One night, he hired a group of thugs. They broke into the room where Abelard was sleeping. They seized him, and they performed an act of brutal symbolic revenge. They castrated him. This was more than just a physical mutilation. It was a complete and utter humiliation, a destruction of Abelard's manhood and his future. A castrated man could never again hold high office in the church. His career as a great public figure was over. In a single horrific night of violence, Abelard's world was destroyed. The news of the attack scandalized Paris. The public outcry was so great that Fulbert's thugs were captured and punished. They were blinded and themselves castrated. Fulbert himself was disgraced, his property confiscated. But the damage to Abelard was irreparable. In his shame and despair, Abelard retreated from the world. He became a monk at the great abbey of St. Denis, and, in an act that Heloise would never forgive him for, he commanded her to take the veil and become a nun as well. She obeyed, not out of a sense of religious calling, but out of her love and obedience to him. In her own words, It was not any sense of vocation, but your command alone which drove me to the cloister. They were both now, in their early 20s, confined to a life of religious seclusion, their passionate love affair brought to a brutal and tragic end. For many years they lived separate, silent lives. Abelard, after a time, resumed his teaching and writing, though his career was now constantly plagued by accusations of heresy from his many theological enemies. Héloïse, for her part, rose to become a respected and brilliant abbess, the head of her own convent. Their son, Astrolabe, was raised by Abelard's family, and he disappears from the historical record, his ultimate fate unknown. It was only years later, after Abelard wrote his Story of My Misfortunes as a letter of consolation to a friend, that their famous correspondence began. A copy of this letter fell into the hands of Héloïse. Reading it, she was overcome with a fresh wave of grief and anger. She saw that Abelard had written of their love as a sin, as a weakness, as the cause of his downfall. He had not written to her, or about her, with the love and intellectual respect she felt she deserved, and so she wrote to him. Her first letter is one of the most remarkable documents of the Middle Ages. It is a work of profound emotional honesty, of intellectual brilliance, and of searing, passionate anger. She reminds him of the depth of her love, of her willingness to sacrifice everything for him. She chastises him for his coldness, for his self-pity, for his attempt to reframe their love as a simple story of sin and punishment. "Tell me one thing, if you can," she writes. "Why, after our entry into religion, which was your decision alone, have I been so neglected and forgotten by you that I have had no word from you?" This letter reopened the conversation between them. Abelard replied, his own letter more formal, more theological, urging her to accept their fate as God's will, to devote herself to her new life as the bride of Christ. But Héloïse would not be silenced. In her subsequent letters, she continues to challenge him, to analyze their past relationship with a philosopher's rigor and a lover's passion. She questions the very nature of sin, of virtue, of divine justice. Their correspondence becomes a profound, ongoing philosophical dialogue, a debate about love, God, and the meaning of suffering. The letters of Héloïse and Abelard are a window into the souls of two extraordinary individuals. They are a testament to a love that was so powerful it defied the conventions of their time, and to the brutal consequences of that defiance. But they are also a testament to the enduring power of the human intellect, and to the timeless human need to make sense of our own suffering, to turn our personal calamities into a story that has meaning. They would never meet again in person. Abelard died in 1142, and his body was secretly brought by a friend to Héloïse's convent, the Paraclete. She buried him there, and for the next 20 years, she continued to lead her community, her reputation as a wise and learned abbess growing throughout Europe. When she died, she was buried in the same tomb as Abelard. Centuries later, their remains were moved to the Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris, where their tomb remains a site of pilgrimage for lovers and intellectuals to this day. The story of Héloïse and Abelard is a tragedy, but it is not just a tragedy. It is a story of a love that was inseparable from a shared intellectual passion. It is the story of a woman who, in an age that afforded women little voice, used her brilliant mind and her powerful pen to demand that her own experience, her own love, and her own suffering be seen and heard and understood. And in the quiet, beautiful, and heartbreaking letters that they left behind, their voices can still be heard. A quiet, intimate whisper from a distant past, speaking to the eternal and often painful complexities of the human heart. Let us now move from a love story we know intimately through personal letters to one we know only through a collection of beautiful, enigmatic, and deeply mysterious images and poems. We leave the specific, documented world of 12th century Paris and travel forward in time and space to the early 14th century, in the German-speaking lands of the Holy Roman Empire. Our object of contemplation is not a person but a thing, a book. But it is a book unlike any other. It is a large, lavish, and breathtakingly beautiful illuminated manuscript, a collection of love poetry known as the Codex Manesse. To understand this manuscript, we must first try to imagine its physical presence. This is not a small personal diary. It is a substantial, heavy object, its pages made of fine, smooth parchment, the carefully prepared skin of over 170 calves. It is a book of immense value, a project that would have required a huge investment of time, skill, and wealth. For centuries, this manuscript lay in relative obscurity, its importance recognized only by a handful of scholars. Its survival is a near miracle, having narrowly escaped a fire in the 17th century that left its edges singed, a faint, dark halo on its precious pages. To open the Codex Manesse is to open a window into the highly stylized, romantic, and often surprisingly sensual world of late medieval courtly love. The manuscript is an anthology, a greatest hits collection of the works of the Minnesänger, the German poets and singers of courtly love. It contains the works of over 140 poets, from emperors and great nobles to more humble professional minstrels. But what makes the Codex truly extraordinary is not just the poetry, it is the illustrations. Preceding the section for each poet is a full-page, stunningly beautiful miniature portrait. There are 137 of these portraits in total, and they are a vibrant, technicolor dream of the medieval imagination. The colors are as bright and jewel-like as the day they were painted. Rich blues made from lapis lazuli, brilliant reds from vermilion, and shimmering gold leaf that catches the light. These illustrations are not realistic portraits in the modern sense. They are idealized, symbolic representations of the poet and the themes of his work. They are, in essence, the medieval equivalent of an author's photograph on a book jacket, but one that is infinitely more revealing of their artistic persona. Let us spend some time with these images, for it is in their quiet, symbolic language that the mystery and the beauty of the Codex resides. Here we see the great poet Walter von der Vogelweide, not in the act of writing, but in a pose of contemplative melancholy. He sits on a rock, his head resting thoughtfully on his hand, his gaze distant. This is the image of the pensive, love-sick poet, his mind lost in the contemplation of his unattainable lady. In another illustration, we see the nobleman Herr Conrad von Altstetten. He is depicted in a small boat with his beloved. She is handing him a letter, a love note, while he steers the boat with one hand and reaches for her with the other. The scene is one of idyllic, romantic intimacy, a stolen moment of peace and connection. But even here, there are layers of symbolism. The water they float on could represent the dangerous, unpredictable currents of love itself. Some of the images are more playful, more sensual. The poet known as the Burgrave of Lienz is shown climbing a ladder to his lady's window in a castle tower, a classic trope of the secret lover. She reaches down to help him, her expression one of eager anticipation. The image is charged with a sense of romantic risk and clandestine desire. In another, the poet Herr Gottfried von Nyphen is shown in a bathhouse with a group of women, a scene of surprising, almost casual nudity and intimacy. These illustrations are a visual dictionary of the language of courtly love. We see knights jousting in tournaments, their lances and shields decorated with the colors of their chosen lady. We see couples exchanging symbolic gifts, a ring, a glove, a small flower. The falcon, a symbol of the noble hunt, appears frequently, often resting on the lady's wrist, a sign of her power and her untamed yet controlled nature. The mirror is another common symbol, a reflection of both outer beauty and inner virtue. But the Codex is not just a collection of pretty pictures. It is a complex cultural artifact, and its true purpose is a matter of some scholarly debate. Who commissioned this incredibly expensive book, and why? The manuscript takes its name from the Manesse family, a wealthy and influential patrician family from the city of Zurich in modern-day Switzerland. It is believed that a member of this family, likely Rüdiger Manesse and his son Johannes, were the patrons who commissioned the work. They were not great nobles themselves, but wealthy citizens who were patrons of the arts, and their goal may have been to create a definitive collection of the great lyric poetry of their culture, a monument to the literary tradition they admired. But is it simply an anthology? Or is it something more? Is it a work of fiction, a kind of beautifully illustrated novel telling a larger story? Or is it a private document, a kind of elaborate shared diary for a specific circle of aristocratic lovers? The poems themselves are as complex and coded as the illustrations. The Minnesang, or love song, was a highly conventionalized art form with its own strict rules and recurring themes. The central theme is almost always the poet's unrequited and often secret love for a high-born, usually married lady. The poet suffers in a state of perpetual sweet sorrow, his love ennobling him, making him a better knight and a better man, even though it can never be consummated. This is the classic formula of courtly love. But within this formula, the poets of the Codex Manesse express a wide range of emotions, from profound spiritual devotion to surprisingly frank and earthy erotic desire. The language they use is often deliberately ambiguous, full of metaphors and double meanings, designed to be understood by the initiated, but opaque to outsiders. Love is a sickness, a wound, a form of sweet imprisonment. The lady is a rose, a star, a divine being who is both the source of the poet's suffering and his only hope for salvation. This coded language was a necessity in a world where the expression of romantic and sensual love was fraught with danger. The Church, which was the ultimate moral authority, viewed passionate love with deep suspicion. It was seen as a form of idolatry, a dangerous distraction from the proper love of God. And in the rigidly hierarchical and patriarchal world of the medieval nobility, a real-life affair between a knight and his lord's wife would not be a matter for poetry. It would be a matter of treason, with brutal consequences. The Codex, therefore, can be seen as a kind of instruction manual, a guide to navigating the complex and dangerous currents of romantic desire in a highly repressive society. It provided a language, a set of symbols and conventions, through which men and women of the court could express their feelings, could play the game of love without openly transgressing the strict moral and social codes of their world. It was a form of sublimation, a way to channel the powerful, often chaotic force of human desire into a beautiful, ordered, and socially acceptable art form. But was it all just a game? Or do the poems and illustrations of the Codex Manesse reflect the real, lived experiences of the men and women of the 14th century court? This is the central, and perhaps unanswerable, mystery of the manuscript. Are we looking at a sincere expression of personal longing, or a highly sophisticated form of literary performance? The truth is likely somewhere in between. The conventions of courtly love provided a framework, but within that framework, real human emotions of love, of desire, of jealousy, of heartbreak were undoubtedly at play. To spend time with the Codex of Longing is to be drawn into a world that is at once strangely familiar and deeply alien. The language of love, the pain of unrequited desire, the joy of a secret, shared glance. These are timeless human experiences. But the way these experiences are expressed, the elaborate codes and symbols, the fusion of the spiritual and the sensual, the constant tension between passion and propriety, this is a world that is uniquely medieval. The manuscript itself is a silent, beautiful testament to the enduring power of love and art. It is a reminder that even in a world that was often harsh, violent, and rigidly controlled, people found ways to express the most profound and intimate of human emotions. They did so with a grace, a subtlety, and a beauty that can still speak to us across the centuries. The Codex is a collection of secrets, a book of whispers from a world where the most important things were often left unsaid, or were said only in the coded, beautiful, and deeply human language of a poem or a picture. It is a quiet, contemplative object that invites us not to find a single, simple answer, but to simply be present with its mystery, to appreciate its beauty, and to listen to the faint, distant echoes of the long-lost voices of medieval love. Let us now ascend from the world of the common messenger and the passionate, tragic affair of scholars, and even from the mysterious intimacy of a secret manuscript. We move now into the highest echelons of medieval society, into the brightly lit, perfumed, and rigidly controlled world of the noble court. Here, in the great halls of castles and the manicured gardens of palaces, love was not a private, spontaneous emotion. It was a game, a performance, a complex and highly ritualized art form known as finamore, or as we have come to call it, courtly love. This was the world that produced the poetry of the Codex Manesse, the world for which those beautiful coded images were created. But to imagine this as a world of pure, unadulterated romance would be a profound misunderstanding. While the poetry spoke of overwhelming passion and selfless devotion, the reality of a noblewoman's life was often one of profound emotional restraint. Her affections were not her own to give. Her life was governed by duty, by lineage, and by the cold, hard pragmatics of feudal politics. The game of courtly love, for all its beauty and emotional intensity, was often played within the gilded bars of a very comfortable, but very real, silken cage. Imagine yourself as a young noblewoman in a great castle in 12th or 13th century France or Germany. Your life from birth has been a political calculation. You are not primarily an individual. You are an asset to your family, a piece on the great chessboard of feudal power. Your marriage was likely arranged when you were still a child, a strategic alliance designed to unite two powerful families, to secure a border, or to consolidate a claim to a piece of land. Your husband is a man you may have barely known before your wedding day, a man chosen for you by your father. He is your lord and master, and your primary duty to him and to your lineage is to produce a male heir. In this context, where marriage is a political and economic contract, romantic love is seen as something separate, something almost irrelevant to the institution. And it is into this emotional void that the ideal of courtly love emerges. It is a way to experience the intense, ennobling, and often overwhelming emotions of love in a way that, in theory, does not threaten the sanctity of the marriage contract or the stability of the social order. The rules of this game are complex and unwritten, understood by all the players in the court. The central figure is always the lady, the domina. She is almost always a high-ranking noblewoman, and she is almost always married. Her admirer is a young, unmarried knight, often of a lower social standing, who serves in her husband's household. He pledges his undying selfless devotion to her. He becomes her vassal in the court of love, just as he is her husband's vassal on the field of battle. His love for her is meant to be a secret, a delicious shared conspiracy between the two of them, though in the close, gossip-filled world of a medieval court, it is often a secret that everyone knows. He performs great deeds in her honor. He wears her colors, a scarf or a ribbon she has given him, into the tournament. His victories on the jousting field are not for his own glory, but for hers. He writes her poetry, he sings her songs, his art a testament to her beauty, her virtue, and her inspiring power. His love is meant to be a source of constant, sweet suffering. The lady is, by definition, unattainable. She's another man's wife, and so the knight exists in a state of perpetual noble longing. This suffering, this amour de long, or love from afar, is not seen as a negative thing. It is seen as a purifying, ennobling force. The knight's unrequited love for his lady makes him a better man. It inspires him to be more courageous, more chivalrous, more virtuous. It refines his rough, warlike nature, teaching him the gentle arts of poetry, music, and polite conversation. He is serving her, and in serving her, he is civilizing himself. And what of the lady's role in this game? She is the object of all this devotion, the sun around which the knight orbits. Her role is to be inspiring, to be worthy of this great love. She must be beautiful, of course, but she must also be virtuous, intelligent, and graceful. She holds all the power in this romantic dynamic. She can reward her knight for his devotion with a smile, a kind word, a small token, or she can punish him for some perceived slight with a cold glance or a period of stony silence, plunging him into the depths of despair. She is the judge, the queen, the goddess of their private romantic religion. This, at least, is the theory. The beautiful, idealized vision of courtly love as it is presented in the poetry and the romances of the time. The reality, for the noblewoman at the center of this performance, was often far more complex and constrained. She was not a free agent. She was constantly under the watchful eye of her husband, her family, and the entire court. Her power in the game of courtly love was a highly circumscribed one. It was the power to inspire, to reward, and to chastise, but it was not the power to act freely on her own desires. Her participation in this ritual was, in many ways, expected of her. A great lady was supposed to have an admirer, a devoted knight who sang her praises. It was a mark of her status, a testament to her beauty and her virtue. To refuse to play the game, to be a woman without a courtly lover, might be seen as a sign of being undesirable, or worse, of being overly pious and unsociable. She was, in a sense, performing a role that was assigned to her by the culture of the court, and the performance was a demanding one. She had to navigate a treacherous emotional and social landscape. She had to encourage her knight's devotion enough to keep him loyal and inspired, but not so much that it would cross the line into a genuine, consummated affair that could lead to scandal, ruin, and even death. The line between the idealized spiritual love of the poems and the real physical desire of two young people was a fine and dangerous one. A single, careless misstep, a secret meeting that was discovered, a letter that fell into the wrong hands could bring the entire, beautiful artifice crashing down. The consequences for a noblewoman accused of adultery were far more severe than for her male lover. A knight might be exiled or lose his position. A noblewoman would bring shame not just upon herself, but upon her entire family, upon her husband's name, and upon the legitimacy of her children. The punishment could be brutal. She might be publicly shamed, her hair shorn. She might be repudiated by her husband and sent to a remote, harsh convent for the rest of her life. In some cases, she could be executed. The silken cage, for all its beauty, was a cage nonetheless, and its bars were made of cold, hard iron. The emotional life of a noblewoman, therefore, was a landscape of profound contradictions. She was publicly adored, placed on a pedestal, worshipped as a near-divine being in the poetry of her admirers. But she was privately constrained, her body and her affections the property of her husband, her choices dictated by the needs of her lineage. The game of courtly love was, perhaps, a way of navigating these contradictions, a space where she could experience a form of emotional intimacy and personal agency that was denied to her in her real married life. It was a fantasy, a beautiful shared illusion, but it was a fantasy that may have made an otherwise constrained and emotionally barren life more bearable. Let us imagine an evening in the great hall of a castle. The fire roars in the hearth. The trestle tables have been cleared after the evening meal. A travelling troubadour is singing a new song, a tale of a knight's hopeless love for a distant princess. The lady of the castle sits in her high-backed chair, her husband, the great lord, beside her. She listens to the song, her expression serene, unreadable. Across the room, a young knight, a member of her husband's retinue, catches her eye. He is the one who wrote the song. His gaze is full of a passionate, respectful adoration. She allows herself a small, almost imperceptible smile in his direction, a fleeting acknowledgement of their secret understanding. Her husband, deep in a conversation about a border dispute with a neighbouring baron, notices nothing. In this small, silent exchange, the entire world of courtly love is contained. It is a world of performance, of hidden meanings, of emotions that are expressed not in open declarations, but in a shared glance across a crowded room. For the knight, this small smile is a treasure, a reward that will fuel his devotion for weeks to come. For the lady, it is a moment of quiet power, a small act of personal agency in a life that is otherwise largely not her own. This is not to say that all noble marriages were loveless, or that all courtly love affairs were chaste, platonic fantasies. Human emotion is rarely so neat. There were undoubtedly happy, companionable marriages among the nobility, and there were undoubtedly courtly love affairs that crossed the line and became real, passionate, and deeply dangerous physical relationships. The story of Heloise and Abelard, while from a different social context, is a testament to the fact that such profound passions could and did exist. But the ideal of courtly love, as a cultural phenomenon, provided a structure, a language, for navigating the complex emotional landscape of the elite. It was a system that, on the one hand, reinforced the patriarchal order by channeling the potentially disruptive force of romantic love into a safe, non-consummated, and socially acceptable form. But on the other hand, it elevated the status of the noblewoman, placing her at the center of the cultural and emotional life of the court, giving her a form of power and influence that she would not otherwise have had. It is a world of beautiful, shimmering surfaces and deep, often turbulent undercurrents. It is a world where the most intense emotions are wrapped in layers of silk and poetry and carefully observed ritual. It is a world that can seem, to our modern sensibilities, both incredibly romantic and deeply repressive. But for the men and women who lived within it, it was simply their reality. It was a game with high stakes, a performance with a strict script, a silken cage that was, for some, a prison, and for others, the only stage on which they were allowed to truly feel alive. Let us now delve deeper into the secret language of the medieval heart. We have seen how love and desire were channeled into the formal structures of poetry and courtly performance. But beneath these grand structures lay a more subtle, more intimate, and often more personal world of communication. This was a world of symbols, of coded gestures, and of hidden meanings embedded in the everyday objects that passed between lovers. In a society where open declarations of passion were often impossible or dangerous, lovers had to find other ways to speak. They developed a silent, secret language, a vocabulary of flowers, animals, and objects, a language that could convey the most profound emotions without a single word being written or spoken aloud. To understand this language, we must first adjust our own modern sensibilities. We live in a world of direct, literal communication. For the medieval mind, the world was a book written by God, and everything in it, every plant, every animal, every colour, had a deeper, symbolic meaning. This symbolic worldview was not just a matter for theologians. It permeated every aspect of daily life, and it provided a rich and complex palette for lovers to use in their secret correspondence. Let us begin with the language of flowers, a practice that we now associate with the Victorian era, but which had deep roots in the medieval period. A flower given by a lady to her knight was never just a flower, it was a message. The specific type of flower, its color, and even the way it was presented, all carried a specific meaning. The red rose, then as now, was the ultimate symbol of passionate, romantic love. To be given a red rose was a clear and unambiguous declaration of affection, but other flowers carried more subtle messages. The lily, with its pure white petals, was a symbol of purity, of virtue, and of a more spiritual, idealized love, often associated with the Virgin Mary. A lady might give a lily to her admirer to signify that her love for him was noble and chaste, a love of the soul rather than the body. The carnation, with its spicy clove-like scent, was a symbol of betrothal and fidelity, a promise of steadfastness. The violet, a humble flower that grows close to the ground, was a symbol of modesty and faithfulness. A knight might wear a violet in his helmet to show his humble devotion to his lady. Even the way a flower was worn could carry a message. A flower worn in the hair might signify a carefree heart, while one worn over the heart was a clear symbol of love. This silent language of flowers allowed lovers to communicate across a crowded room, to send messages of encouragement, of warning, or of passion, with a single, simple, and seemingly innocent gesture. A lady could drop her flower accidentally as her chosen knight passed by, a secret signal that only he would understand. Animals, too, were imbued with deep symbolic meaning. We have seen the falcon in the illustrations of the Codex Manesse, resting on the lady's arm. The falcon was a powerful symbol. It was a bird of the nobility, a creature of immense grace, power, and controlled wildness. For a lady to gift her knight with a falcon, or even just one of its jesses or bells, was a sign of great favor. It was a way of saying, just as I have tamed this wild bird, so have I been tamed by my love for you. Or perhaps, I grant you the power to hunt in my name. The dog, particularly the small, elegant greyhound, was another common symbol in love poetry and art. The dog was the ultimate symbol of faithfulness, of unwavering loyalty. A depiction of a lady with a small dog at her feet was a way of emphasizing her virtue and her steadfastness. A knight might compare himself to his lady's loyal hound, willing to follow her, to serve her, and to protect her with his life. The dove, of course, was a universal symbol of peace and of the Holy Spirit, but in the context of love, it also represented gentle, tender affection. A pair of doves was a common symbol for a devoted couple. The mythical unicorn, a creature of pure, untamed wildness that could only be tamed by a virgin, was another powerful symbol. A knight might see his lady as the pure maiden who had tamed the wild beast of his own passions, who had civilized him and made him worthy of her love. Colors themselves were a vital part of this symbolic vocabulary. Every color had a meaning, and the colors a knight chose to wear in a tournament were a public declaration of his emotional state and his allegiance to his lady. Red, as with the rose, was the color of passion and love. Blue was the color of fidelity and faithfulness, a color associated with the Virgin Mary's steadfastness. Green was the color of new life, of spring, and of hope in love. White was the color of purity and innocence, and black was the color of mourning, but also of a deep, sorrowful, and constant love. A knight might wear black to show that he was in mourning for his lady's absence, or that his love for her was a serious, somber, and lifelong commitment. By combining these colors in his costume and on his shield, a knight could send a complex and nuanced message to his lady and to the entire court, a message that would be read and interpreted by all. Objects, too, could be imbued with deep emotional significance. A ring was a powerful and obvious symbol of a bond, of a promise, of an unending circle of love. A lady might give her knight a ring to wear on a ribbon around his neck, a secret token of their connection. A glove was another common love token. To be given a lady's glove was a sign of immense favor. The knight would treasure it, perhaps tucking it into his helmet during a joust. The glove was an intimate object, something that had touched the lady's skin, and it carried a powerful personal charge. Even the act of playing a game, like chess, could be a metaphor for the game of love. The chessboard was the world of the court. The king and queen were the central figures. The knights moved in their own, unique, and often unpredictable ways. A game of chess between a man and a woman, as depicted in many medieval manuscripts, was a scene of intellectual courtship, a battle of wits that mirrored the strategic and often complex maneuvers of their romantic relationship. This symbolic language was not just for the elite. While the grand gestures of the tournament and the expensive gifts of falcons were the preserve of the nobility, the language of flowers and small personal tokens was something that could be understood and used by people of all classes. A simple, hand-carved wooden heart, a lock of hair, a ribbon from a dress. These were the small, precious objects that could carry the weight of a powerful emotional connection. This reliance on a coded, symbolic language tells us something profound about the emotional world of the Middle Ages. It was a world that was, in many ways, far less direct and far more subtle than our own. People were trained from childhood to see the world in symbolic terms, to look for the deeper meaning hidden beneath the surface of things. This made them incredibly sophisticated readers of signs and gestures, but it was also a world that placed immense value on emotional restraint. The open, public expression of strong emotion was often seen as a sign of weakness or a lack of self-control. The symbolic language of love was a way to navigate this tension. It allowed for the expression of the most powerful and passionate of human emotions, but it did so in a way that was indirect, that was coded, that was beautiful and artful. It was a language that veiled desire in a cloak of metaphor, a language that allowed the heart to speak without ever having to raise its voice. To try and read these medieval symbols is to engage in a form of historical detective work. We can consult the bestiaries, the medieval books that catalogued the symbolic meanings of animals. We can read the lapidaries, which did the same for precious stones. We can study the poetry and the art, looking for recurring patterns and associations. But we can never be entirely sure that we are reading the messages correctly. The meanings of these symbols could be fluid, changing over time and from place to place. And some meanings were likely so private, so specific to a particular couple, that they are now lost to us forever. What remains is a sense of a world that was rich in a kind of quiet, poetic communication that we have largely lost. We live in a world that values explicitness, that wants everything to be clearly stated and easily understood. The medieval world of love was a world that valued the implicit, the suggested, the whispered. It was a world where a single, carefully chosen flower could contain more meaning than 1,000 spoken words. It was a world that understood that the most profound messages of the heart are often the ones that are never spoken aloud at all. Let us now delve into the practical and often perilous realities that surrounded the creation and reception of a medieval love letter. The words of passion and the coded symbols we have explored did not simply appear on the page. They were part of a complex and risky process, a process that was deeply embedded in the social fabric of the medieval household, a world of watchful eyes, divided loyalties, and ever-present danger. The greatest threat to a pair of secret lovers was not a bandit on the road. It was the servant who swept the floors, the lady-in-waiting who brushed her mistress's hair, the stable boy who saw a familiar horse tethered in an unusual place. Imagine yourself again as the noble lady in her castle. You have received a letter from your beloved knight, a letter that has been brought to you by the discreet messenger we met in our first story. Now you must read it. This simple act, which we take for granted, is fraught with difficulty. Privacy, as we understand it, was a rare and precious commodity in the medieval world, even for the very wealthy. A noble lady's life was a public performance, and she was almost never truly alone. Her chambers were not a private sanctuary. They were a workspace, a social hub for the female members of the household. She was constantly attended by her ladies-in-waiting, young women from other noble families who were sent to her household to learn the arts of courtly life. These women were her companions, her confidants, but they were also the eyes and ears of their own families. Their loyalty was often a complex and shifting thing. A lady had to be incredibly careful about which of her attendants she could trust with a secret as dangerous as a forbidden love affair. So, where does she read her letter? Perhaps she feigns a headache and asks to be left alone for an hour, a request that might itself arouse suspicion if made too often. Or perhaps she finds a quiet corner in the castle's walled garden, the Hortus Conclusus, a space that was symbolic of her own enclosed virtue, but which might offer a few precious moments of solitude. Or maybe she waits until the dead of night, when the rest of the household is asleep, and reads the letter by the flickering, insufficient light of a single candle, her heart pounding at every creak of the floorboards outside her door. And now she must compose a reply. This presents an even greater set of challenges. Firstly, she must have the materials. Parchment, ink, and a well-cut quill were expensive items, not readily available to everyone. A large household would have a supply for official correspondence, But for a lady to be seen constantly using these materials for her own private letters might attract unwanted attention. Secondly, and more fundamentally, she must have the skill of literacy. While many noble women in the later Middle Ages were taught to read, particularly devotional texts, the skill of writing was far less common. The physical act of writing, of forming the complex letters of a medieval script with a quill and ink, was a specialized craft. If Our Lady is not a confident writer, she must rely on a scribe. This means she must bring another person into her conspiracy of the heart. She must dictate the most intimate and dangerous of her thoughts to a clerk or a priest, a man who is now in possession of a secret that could destroy her. Choosing a scribe was a matter of absolute life or death trust. Was he loyal to her, or was his first loyalty to her husband, the lord of the castle, the man who paid his wages? Let us assume she can write the letter herself. She pours her heart out onto the parchment, using the coded symbolic language we have explored to express her feelings. But what if she writes something that is too direct, too passionate? What if her emotions get the better of her, and she commits to the page a sentiment that, if intercepted, would leave no doubt as to the nature of their relationship? The act of writing is a risk. Every word is a potential piece of evidence. And so, we find in the literature of the time the recurring motif of the unsent letter. A lover will write a passionate declaration, and then, in a moment of fear or sober second thought, will burn it, the words turning to ash, the secret kept safe for another day. The space between the desire to communicate and the danger of communication is the space where much of the emotional drama of medieval love takes place. Once the letter is written, folded, and sealed, it must be hidden until the messenger can be summoned again. Where do you hide such a dangerous object in a household where you have almost no private space? Perhaps it is tucked inside a book of psalms, its passionate words hidden between prayers. Perhaps it is placed in a small locked casket, a box of jewels and personal treasures. But locks can be broken, and prying eyes are everywhere. The household is a network of information. The servants, while often invisible to their masters and mistresses, see and hear everything. They are the true masters of the castle's secret geography. They know the quiet corridors, the hidden staircases, the places where a secret conversation can be overheard. The lady-in-waiting who helps her mistress dress might notice a new, unfamiliar locket around her neck. The laundress who washes the linens might find a stray note, forgotten in the pocket of a gown. The stable boy who tends to the horses knows which knight is riding out at unusual hours and in which direction he is heading. These servants are not a monolithic block. They have their own loyalties, their own grievances, their own ambitions. A servant who is loyal to the lady might act as a discreet go-between, a facilitator of her secret affair. But a servant who feels they have been wronged by the lady, or one who sees an opportunity for personal gain, could become a dangerous informant. A single, whispered word to the lord of the castle, a hint of something amiss, is all it would take to bring the entire fragile world of the secret lovers crashing down. The lovers themselves must live in a state of constant, nerve-wracking vigilance. Their every public interaction is a performance. They must be careful not to look at each other for too long in the great hall. They must be careful not to be seen talking together too often. Their love story is a piece of theatre, but it is a play in which a single missed cue or a single forgotten line could have fatal consequences. Consider the role of the husband in this drama. He is not necessarily a villain. He is a man of his time, a man for whom marriage is a matter of property, lineage, and honor. An affair conducted by his wife is not just a personal betrayal, it is a public humiliation. It questions his authority, his manhood, and, most critically, the legitimacy of his heirs. If his wife has a lover, how can he be sure that the son who will inherit his name and his lands is truly his own? This is a question of existential importance in the world of feudal inheritance. His response to the discovery of an affair would therefore be driven not just by personal jealousy, but by a cold, hard, political and economic necessity. He would be expected by his peers and by the society in which he lived to act, and to act decisively. And so, the quiet personal act of writing and receiving a love letter is surrounded by a vast, invisible web of social and political forces. It is an act that takes place against a backdrop of constant surveillance, of shifting loyalties, and of potentially brutal consequences. This is why the language of the letters had to be so careful, so coded. This is why the lovers relied on the silent language of flowers and symbolic gifts. These were ways of communicating in plain sight. of sending messages that would be understood by the intended recipient, but which would seem innocent to the casual observer. The entire culture of courtly love, with its emphasis on secrecy, on suffering, and on the unattainability of the beloved, can be seen as a beautiful and sophisticated response to these very real dangers. It was a way of making a virtue out of a necessity. The love had to be secret, so the poets celebrated the beauty of secret love. The lovers had to endure the pain of separation and longing, so the poets wrote of the ennobling power of suffering. To read the surviving love letters of the Middle Ages, therefore, is to read a text that is only half complete. The words on the page are only part of the story. The other part of the story is the silence that surrounds them, the risks that were taken to write and deliver them, the fear of discovery, the network of trusted friends and servants who made them possible, and the vast watching world that they were written in defiance of. Each letter is a small, quiet triumph of human connection over a system designed to control and constrain it. It is a fragile, beautiful artifact, a testament to the fact that even in the most rigid and hierarchical of societies, the human heart will always find a way to speak, even if it is only in a whisper. Let us now conclude our journey, not in the throes of passion or the chill of a secret meeting, but here, in the quiet after. We have followed the messenger on his perilous route. We have sat with the scholar lovers in their torment. We have puzzled over the coded desires of a forgotten manuscript. And we have navigated the silken, treacherous currents of the noble court. But our journey is not complete without considering the final, most miraculous part of any historical love letter's story: its survival. The words we have been contemplating, the intimate whispers and grand declarations, were never meant for us. They were ephemeral things, intended for the eyes of one person only, destined to be read, perhaps treasured for a time, and then, in all likelihood, destroyed. A love letter was a dangerous object, a piece of evidence. The safest course of action, once it had been read and its message absorbed, was to burn it, to turn the proof of a secret passion into harmless, innocent ash. The vast, overwhelming majority of medieval love letters met this fate. The ones that have survived are the exceptions, the statistical outliers, the ghosts that have, through some strange combination of accident, sentiment, or historical chance, managed to cheat the flames and the slow, relentless decay of time. To hold a medieval love letter in your hand, or even to look at a high-resolution image of one, is to be in the presence of a profound act of historical survival. Consider the physical object itself. It is a piece of parchment, the prepared skin of an animal, or perhaps a sheet of rag paper. It is a fragile, organic thing. It is susceptible to damp, which can cause it to rot and mildew. It is vulnerable to fire, to being torn, to being eaten by mice or insects. For this small, delicate object to have survived for 6, 7, or 800 years is in itself a minor miracle. How then did these letters survive? The paths they took through history are as varied and as fascinating as the contents of the letters themselves. Some survived because they were not seen as dangerous, but as models of good writing. The letters of Héloïse and Abelard, for example, were preserved not necessarily because of their scandalous content, but because they were considered masterpieces of Latin prose. They were copied by monks and scholars, used in classrooms to teach the art of rhetoric and letter writing. They were transformed from intensely personal documents into educational texts, their raw, human passion preserved for centuries under the respectable cloak of classical learning. Other letters survived through sheer dumb luck. They were tucked away in a larger bundle of more important documents, legal deeds, household accounts, official correspondence, and simply forgotten. A family's archive, stored in a heavy oak chest for generations, might be passed down, its contents unexamined, until one day, centuries later, a curious descendant or a diligent historian opens the chest and, amidst the dry legal contracts, finds a single, folded piece of parchment, a small, quiet voice from the distant past. They survived because they were overlooked. Some survived because of the very sentiment that made them so dangerous in the first place. A lover might not have been able to bring themselves to destroy the precious words of their beloved. They might have hidden the letters away in a secret place, a loose floorboard, a hollowed-out book, intending to keep them forever, a private treasure. If that person died suddenly, or if their hiding place was forgotten, the letters might lie dormant for centuries, waiting to be rediscovered by a future generation during a renovation or a demolition. These are perhaps the most poignant survivors, the letters that were saved by the very love that they express. The survival of a document like the Codex Manesse is a different story altogether. A book of such immense value and beauty was always destined to be a treasured object. It was preserved not by accident, but by design. It was passed from one wealthy collector to another, a prized possession for great libraries and noble families. It survived because its artistic and cultural value was recognized from the beginning. It was seen not as a collection of private, dangerous love notes, but as a monument to a great literary tradition, a national treasure. But in preserving the art, its patrons also, perhaps unintentionally, preserved the intimate human desires that inspired it. To read these surviving letters today is to engage in a profound act of historical eavesdropping. We are peering into a world that was meant to be private, and this presents us with a unique set of challenges as modern observers. We must be careful not to impose our own values and assumptions on these distant voices. The way they understood love, desire, marriage, and sin was fundamentally different from our own. Their world was governed by a set of social and religious rules that we can study, but never fully internalize. We must also be aware of what is missing. The letters that have survived are almost exclusively the products of the literate elite. They are the voices of the nobles, the scholars, the wealthy merchants. We have no surviving love letters from the vast majority of the medieval population. The peasants, the artisans, the common soldiers. They may have loved just as passionately, but their stories were not written down. Their loves are lost to the silence of history. The letters we have are a small, privileged window into the emotional world of the past, and we must always remember the vast silent majority whose voices we will never hear. What then is the legacy of these fragile, beautiful survivors? They are, first and foremost, a powerful reminder of our shared humanity. To read the words of Heloise, her heart breaking with a sense of love and betrayal, or to look at the image of the knight in the Codex Manesse, his face etched with a noble, lovesick melancholy, is to feel a direct emotional connection to people who lived and loved 1,000 years ago. Their world was different, their clothes were different, their beliefs were different, but the fundamental human emotions they express, longing, joy, jealousy, heartbreak, are as recognizable to us as our own. These letters collapse the centuries. They are a bridge across time, a quiet testament to the enduring, unchanging nature of the human heart. They also serve as a powerful counterpoint to the more common narratives of the Middle Ages. History so often focuses on the grand public events, the wars, the politics, the building of cathedrals. The letters open a door into the private, domestic, and emotional world that lay behind this public facade. They show us a world that was not just about piety and violence, but also about passion and beauty, and the profound, complex, and often painful business of human relationships. They give a voice to the women of the period, allowing us to hear, in their own words, their desires, their frustrations, and their remarkable intellectual and emotional resilience. And finally, the very fragility of these documents, the sheer improbability of their survival, is a lesson in itself. It reminds us that our knowledge of the past is always incomplete, always partial, always at the mercy of chance and accident. History is not a complete finished story. It is a mosaic, pieced together from the scattered fragments that have managed to survive. Every letter we have is a precious, irreplaceable piece of that mosaic, a small point of light in a vast, surrounding darkness. So let us now let these ancient voices fall silent. Let the scent of old parchment and faded ink dissipate into the quiet of your own room. The secret loves, the coded messages, the passionate arguments, they have all been laid to rest. The ink has dried, the wax seals have been broken, and the stories have been told. What remains is not the drama, but the quiet, enduring beauty of the words themselves, and the profound, simple fact of their survival. As you settle now more deeply into your own comfort, into a world where communication is instant and privacy is a choice, perhaps you can appreciate the immense, quiet effort that once went into the simple act of telling someone you loved them. The world we have visited tonight was one of constraints, of dangers, and of deep, unspoken feelings. Your own world is one of almost infinite freedom in comparison. The quiet of your room, the safety of your own bed, the freedom to speak your own heart without fear, these are the true treasures. Let the memory of these ancient letters be a final, gentle reminder of the enduring power of human connection and of the quiet, beautiful ways we have always found to say what is in our hearts. Allow yourself now to drift, to let go of these whispered words from the past, and to find your own peaceful, untroubled rest.